Worst airport story: 2 early days of Key Lesko. My dad picked me up after a coach flight from Kayes to Germany. Flight over the big pond was overbooked. I waited for the next plane to leave for Europe about an hour later for Rome. The onboard entertainment system in my seat was broken. I had changed the seat with a random person so he could sit with his GF. Landing in Rome, I had only 20 minutes to get from Terminal E Gate 34 to Terminal E Gate 2. Just so managed, airline forgot to tell the other airline I'm boarding too. After some talking, they let me board, landed in Frankfurt. Total time of traveling so far, 25h. My dad picked me up at the airport, dumped my bags in his coat with the key fob in the trunk. The trunk locked itself. Usually it should notice the key was inside. Luckily, my dad had his phone in his shirt's pocket. We called Mercedes about opening the trunk. They told us we could smash one of the rear lights and try to get the key through the hole, or we could wait and one of their mechanics would come by and essentially do the same. We asked about a replacement for the light and they told us it'd take 2 days. Driving without is not an option, so we denied. 26h total traveling without sleeping. I can't sleep on planes, so we tried to call someone from family to get the replacement key. My mom wasn't home but visiting somewhere. My sister was home but was talking to her BF for 4 hours without end and without looking at messages. 30h without sleep. After those 4 hours, my sister asked her BF to get the keys to us, which he thankfully did. It was a 3.5h ride from our place to the airport, 33.5h without sleep. Once we were able to access the car again, I got in and fell asleep 10 minutes after we hit the Autobahn. Arrived home another 3.5h later. My luggage took 3 more days because of the change of flights. This one might be lengthy, so bear with me. My family was going on a trip to Disney World in 2019. We show up to the airport at around 9 a.m., go through the whole process of checking in, and wait for our flight at 11 a.m. We board the plane and settle in, and the pilot lines it up to leave on the runway. About 30 minutes go by of the plane sitting on the runway, and the flight attendants handing out Biscoff cookies, until we are informed that the flight is delayed due to minor storm conditions in the area, so the pilot drives the plane right back to the airport. We continue to wait hour after hour for our flight to board again, and we knew that as soon as the airport staff began handing out complimentary sandwiches that we were gonna be there for a while. Eventually the flight gets canceled, so we go through the painstaking process of booking another later 7 p.m. flight that same day along with pretty much everyone else that had been on the previous flight. Our whole first day at Animal Kingdom went to waste, so we reorganized our trip a bit to pass the time of waiting again. We sit at a bar in the airport for hours, telling the bartender about our whole plight, who was super nice and cool and pretty much exclusively responded in short answers like, "What, damn, that sucks, sorry," until it gets close to our boarding time. We get to the designated waiting area and surprise, the flight gets delayed again, and again, and again. We're even told that a different pilot and crew than expected are arranged for the flight. Everyone in the waiting area eventually formed a bond due to the situation, and I ended up having lengthy conversations with a lot of them. There were so many characters in this room. This one guy was dressed head to toe in an entirely purple suit with some pins and accents decorating it, and told me all, and I mean all, about his job as a traveling clergyman and his daughter in college pursuing a different career. This other elderly man was sitting in mostly silence the entire wait, if not asleep, sitting up and snoring. Another girl was nervously boarding this flight entirely on her own for the first time and had friends already in Orlando waiting for her. And this other woman, let's call her N, lived in a different state than the airport, was meeting with her daughter at their Disney resort room, and reminded my mom a lot of my grandma. Eventually, it gets to the point where we're all grumpy and tired of watching the boarding time on the screen count down to 0, then reset to another hour delay. However, things are looking hopeful because we see the new pilot and crew go down the hallway toward where the plane is, and everyone claps and hollers. The boarding time eventually pushes to 1 a.m., and everyone's nerves are shot in that waiting room. As expected, the wait time on screen counts down slowly to 0, then resets to a 3 a.m. boarding time. The whole room goes absolutely nuts. I have never seen that many people hysterical and at their breaking points. People start yelling at the staff at the desk by the waiting room who aren't responsible at all for the situation, and others start complaining as they find nearby hotel rooms to book. My mom immediately stands up and drags us out of there, and we just head home, ready to cancel the whole trip at that point. The car ride was not enjoyable, like at all. Lots of yelling. We go to sleep unhappy and wake up the next morning still absolutely ruined from spending 12 plus hours in the airport the day before. Then my mom gets a notification on her phone saying our luggage was loaded and sent to the Orlando airport. Turns out the plane actually took off at 3 a.m. We're freaking out, but mostly unfazed at this point. We rush back to the airport just as early as yesterday with a new flight scheduled, go through the whole check-in process again, and wait for our boarding time at the same bar. When the bartender sees us, he laughs out loud, throws his hands up and goes, "What? Nah, you're back. Why?" So we update him about the whole situation until we have to leave. Luckily, thankfully, we take off and land in Orlando, still worried about our luggage. When we get to our resort, our luggage is waiting there for us. Another crazy detail, a couple days into the trip, we accidentally reunited with N at a restaurant in Magic Kingdom and met her daughter too, who was definitely a bit weirded out. We even happened to have a ride scheduled for the same time she did and went on it together. Definitely a lengthy story, but definitely fits the prompt. If you read this far, hope this cured your boredom. I study abroad and was coming back to the United States from Israel for the Passover holidays. When I landed in Newark, I was pulled aside at passport control. Why? My passport picture was taken before I hit puberty around 5-6 years ago, so the TSA agents thought I was being trafficked over the border or I was in possession of a fake passport. Anyway, after 20 minutes of asking basic details about my life, where I live, study, parents, etc., I was allowed to go pick up my luggage. I still have that passport and flew 3 more times with it after this case, and I haven't had any problems. My country's government was toppled in a coup mid-flight, and my documents were now deemed unacceptable by the United States. If I stepped out of the terminal, I would be arrested for illegal entry. I was stuck for months. My bank savings were inaccessible, so I started returning people's luggage carts for the return quarters. Eventually, I got hired on a construction crew in the airport. I taught myself English. I negotiated a hostage situation involving goat medicine. I helped 2 employees fall in love and get married. I too fell in love, but it wasn't meant to be. Eventually, I escaped just in time to make it to a jazz club in New York City and get an autograph of a picture I had kept in a coffee can for years. Finally, I made it back to my home country in time to rebuild. Other plane-related hijinks I've got myself into include emergency landing a plane on the Hudson River and surviving a crash of a FedEx plane over the Pacific where I was stranded on an island for like 3 years. I don't fly anymore. Anyway, they eventually made some movies about me. Was traveling to Ireland for a film festival back in 2019 with a teacher and 1 other student. We waited around for a bit waiting for check-in to begin for our flight. Once that began, we got in line and I began looking for my passport and ticket. I knew I had both. Got my passport out and kept looking in my bag for my ticket, and I couldn't find it. Our turn came up and I explained to the security personnel my troubles and was at this point visibly shaking and about to have a panic attack. My teacher tried to help, but the security couldn't allow her to. After what felt like hours, but was probably just like 2 minutes, an airport staff came up to me and told me they could print out a new ticket. 1, the time some guy nearby spent the whole layover practicing his new didgeridoo. 2, the time when someone freaked out and opened an emergency door and no one at the airport had the key to turn off the beeping. 3, my least favorite as it just angers me. In the Navy, on leave visiting friends in Chicago, while I was in, I didn't really dress like it or carry myself in the stereotypical fashion. There was a giant line waiting to check in at United at O'Hare. Employee was going down the line and pulling people for quicker processing the people they announce. Families with children, elderly, and active duty. Guy in front of me looked the typical military, but absolutely wasn't. Nothing would be regulation. Employee asks him, "Are you military?" Guy says no, but quickly changes when he realizes it gets him to cut the line. Employee walks past me, but I stop him and note I'm active duty. He looks me over in my courtesy suit, longer hair and bag covered in geeky pins. "No, you ain't." I show him my ID and he says I don't look like it. I explain I am, but that dude he just let up wasn't. He says he doesn't matter, but if you give me any more lip, I'm calling security. Screw that guy. I did write United and they gave me a voucher, so that's something.